welcome to the 6th iteration of the Stereoscope podcast. Obviously, we are out of the dungeon.
Yes.
Into nature.
The weather has improved here in Portland, so we're trying to do a change of venue a little bit because, the camera's mobile, we're mobile.
Yeah, we can walk around, we can take things outside.
Yeah.
We got some diffusion going on up there. And generally, it's been a couple months.
I think
we had some projects we needed to get under our belts. You had some work, and then we've got some stuff cooking that took up quite a bit of our time recently. So
yeah,
we'll touch on that a little bit towards the end, but we're not going to go into too much detail either. All right, so it seems like there has been, especially since we haven't done a podcast in a while, there's been a lot of news, but there's been a lot of news just in the last couple of weeks. I mean,
the big stuff for me anyway.
Yeah, and we're going to touch on the WWDC announcements from Apple, but there is some stuff that happened recently with the announcement of this new Gracia volumetric capture platform. So it's very interesting, the timing of this, because there's this app called Luma AI, and it's effectively a Gaussian splat recording system. And just last week, I heard about it and I was like, let's see. So I got my phone out and I took a little video of my Quest 3. So I got a Gaussian splat of effectively like my kitchen and my living room with the Quest 3. And holy hell, it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I mean, it took a while to render, but it was really conceptually interesting.
Impressive results for not using LiDAR or anything, just pure image capture and layering and processing.
And the other funny thing was I'd watched a Corridor Crew episode specifically on it. That's how I found out about the Luma AI app. Corridor Crew are a group of VFX YouTubers. They're all industry people. They've worked on big stuff and small stuff, but their whole episode was about Gaussian splatting and how the technology is really coming around. But that being said, this new platform comes out and they're offering an entire Gaussian splatting volumetric capture platform for watching this stuff back. And so it kicked off a discussion with us about what its use will be, how relevant it is for the industry, because I do know that there are going to be some major players in the industry, specifically DEOVR, we're talking about them, that are interested in volumetric playback as a platform. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for Deo, I'd say it's more than an interest. I mean, they really just invested heavily in
they're
volume
heavily
capture booth.
Yeah, they're heavily interested.
Yeah, I mean, and it's it's hard to say about the broader industry because it's a larger industry. We tend to focus on what we do, which is VR video and telling stories in VR video. And in that way, I don't see a lot of application to what we do for volumetric capture. But I think there is a place for it.
For sure. I mean, I got into a Reddit thread and was talking to some people, and I have some skepticism towards volumetric capture. It's interesting, and I think it will be useful for VR. Specifically, I mean, there was that game that came out, the VR game. It's an adaptation of an existing 7th Guest VR came out. It's a remake of a legendary horror point-and-click adventure game from the 1990s. And this game studio came out and they used volumetric capture for all of the performances. And for games, it's really that's very interesting to me, because it means that you can capture live performances and then put those performances into a game where people can walk around them. Now, from a storytelling perspective, that's interesting for games. For passive media, congratulations, you've just invented live theater.
Yeah.
And I think the main use case will be porn, of course. But I can only imagine you're going to run into some really awkward occlusion.
Yeah. It's still, and again, I don't know. I mean,
All that thrusting.
there's a
and
lot of overlap.
slapping.
There's a lot of overlap. So, yeah, I mean, and even there, like, is it that much? Part of me wonders, and I'll probably eat my words at some point, but it feels like the 3D TV of the industry in terms of like, it's neat, and then it's just a thing that you don't use again.
In terms, and specifically in terms of video capture for
Yes.
passive experiences, I think. Yeah.
Like, there's only so many times it's going to be interesting to walk around somebody doing a dance number or whatever in your living room. And beyond that, like, how many people have that much space to do that anyway?
Yeah, I think in terms of an interactive medium, there definitely is some conceptually interesting use cases there, but we'll have to see. I mean, and I also don't want to be one of those people that just because I don't understand the usefulness means that I completely, because we know some people that have that same sort of mindset, and it's quite limiting.
Yeah. So there's always
and frustrating to.
Yeah. So maybe we just can't see the future, and I'm old.
Yeah.
But just so far, like, proper volumetric capture requires a lot of light and cameras and green, and it's not. You can't just set that up and say like, oh, let's capture a play. Speaking of theater, in volumetric,
definitely
that's not happening anytime soon. Anyway.
And especially if for like mood setting and that type of thing, like you can't. It requires a massive amount of light.
Yeah.
And so
plus a lot of green.
I'm sure there will be some people who figure out some of these limitations that we are possibly just not seeing.
Maybe you can do like tracked LiDAR where you can just track the moving subjects and filter everything else out.
Yeah, I also
maybe
did see
like
that with Gaussian splatting, the way that a lot of this works, especially with Luma AI, is that the mesh itself doesn't have any lighting data. So
interesting.
You can't relight it because it's baked. The lighting is baked into the texture.
Right. Yeah. Any shadow that's captured is permanent.
You can relight with the texture, but the texture has all the lighting data baked in.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody will figure out a way to.
Well, maybe not. I mean, you need LiDAR. That's the only way to do that without LiDAR, right?
Yeah.
So you're basically using the shadows to capture the depth. Okay.
So this announcement was Logitech MX Inc. It's a stylus design for Meta Quest headsets that supports both 2D and 3D creativity. It's for creating content in 3D. So there's two places where I think this is heavily relevant and has already been sort of alluded to via other projects. The first is the Sony creativity specific headset that launched or that was announced a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And that one included a stylus that was effectively the same sort of concept for this Logitech MX Pen. It's captured in 3D space, so you can create models, you can trace existing 3D objects, or you can use it as a 2D input method in a 3D space. So if you want to write on a virtual canvas or piece of paper or something like that. And it's got buttons, it's tracked.
Pressure sensitivity, which is super important. And also, it's supported at a system level by Meta. And that is a really big one. And it's one of the things that we've said about why Apple they hint at a lot of these use cases for creativity, the Apple Vision Pro as a production platform. Where Meta hasn't really had any of this same sort of functionality. However, I will say that Meta did sort of allude to something like this previously with the Quest Pro controllers that had a stylus tip. Yeah.
So
the recently deprecated and removed feature, but yes.
Yes, exactly. But they were sort of implying that, we want people to be able to draw in a 3D space. And here's the thing, you can already do most of what this device does just with your controller.
Yeah.
But it's clunky, it doesn't have the same sort of design aesthetic, and it doesn't have the same, I think, sort of use case.
Yeah. I want to say this is going to be more precise. It looks more like easier to handle because I know I like playing with Gravity Sketch and sort of holding the button and doing that whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works, but it's not great. So this is actually pretty interesting to me.
And we've even discussed for our upcoming project the viability of doing 3D spatial storyboards effectively. And a device like this would make it a lot more approachable. You could still do it with controllers, but this seems like a much...
I wouldn't even attempt it. I mean, granted, I guess now that I know about this, I wouldn't even attempt it with controllers.
Yeah. And it's already, you can already pre-order it. It's $130 and it launches in September.
Yeah. I think there's like a $20 off coupon.
That's cool.
To pre-order
I probably will pick this up.
Yeah. I'll wait and see.
Wait for reviews.
Because I'm
not going to pre-order it.
I'm hoping it, because it pairs as like a third controller. You don't have to unpair anything. Like it just works. So I actually think I would like this on airplanes instead of having a controller, just as an interface.
Just so it doesn't look goofy.
It feels lighter. It just feels like you don't have the strap.
That's a good point. Like the controllers, it's sort of like an in between. Like I actually really like controllers. I think they offer a level of input that is hand tracking just is still fairly clunky. I think
requires light, which a lot of times is not available on an airplane.
But something like a stylus is sort of an in between that I think still works really well.
Yeah.
So, and you don't look as goofy.
Yeah, and there's my silly use case scenario, which is because I'm often obviously consuming video on the headset, so I don't need all the functionality of the controller. And if my cat is on my lap and I have the controller, that string, he can't help himself.
So you can remove the string.
I know, but then I need it later, right?
Yeah,
so it's
true.
just
I'm always afraid I'm going to lose it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, that is a $110 fix for that is goofy, I'll admit, but it's just one of many use cases.
All right. Now we're going to launch into a lot of Apple. This is effectively the WWDC part of the show, and there's a lot to go over. We sort of split it up into 3 parts, though this specific part wasn't announced at WWDC, but Upload VR reported on it a couple days ago, and it's hugely relevant and that is that there are rumors, Upload VR has been able to confirm it with their own sources, but that they are deprecating the Apple Vision Pro.
I wouldn't use that word.
Well, not deprecating.
They're placing it on, they're prioritizing a lighter version of the Apple Vision Pro.
Apple Vision Air
over
or
an
AVP2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is as shocking as it seems.
It's 100% exactly what I expected.
It's also what I expected. I will say it means that this was always a dev kit.
Which is what they said it was.
Oh, they didn't say it was a dev kit.
Oh, really?
Everybody else said it was a dev kit.
Yeah, I was like, to me,
except for Apple.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that the new headset is going to be cheaper. I'm guessing it's going to be like, $1,250 or to $1,500.
Yeah, they said like the cost of the same as a high-end iPhone, which is up to $1,600. So
yeah.
take that.
And I'm guessing they'll come in with a lower SKU at, like I said, like $1,250 or so. But then you can spec that up to $2,000. For.
But this doesn't mean
8 gigabytes.
This doesn't mean the AVP is dead by any means. It just means their next move is down market before they go back up market.
Yeah,
that's all that means. I mean, they put it on hold. They didn't kill it.
I think it's most likely that it's going to be a very long time before we see the Apple Vision.
Yeah, I mean, because this is rumored for end of 25. So, yeah. But I think that's fine. I think they did what they needed to do with this, and they're going to go down market. And it sounds like maybe with minimal cuts. Like hopefully they make it lighter, like less glass and metal and stuff. But it sounds like they're not going to try to go with lower end screens. They're just trying to up the supply of them to make them cheaper.
Yeah.
And then probably losing the screen on the front. But
and a lot of that, those screens that they've developed, they've run into so many supply chain issues with them because they're incredibly difficult to make, and supposedly they lost about a third of them in the production process.
Yeah, like
which is
massive.
Yeah, and it has to be incredibly frustrating.
And they're not even that great. Like they have great colors, but that refresh rate thing kills me.
Yeah,
like I admit.
Supposedly the next technology that they're working on is going to have much lower persistence because of a new screen technology.
Yeah,
and so that will effectively minimize the motion blur seen on the Apple Vision Pro headsets. Because right at this point, anything with moving your head or at a high refresh rate really destroys the quality. Got great blacks though.
Definitely breaks the immersion. Yeah, it's like once you're aware of the screen, things start falling apart real quick. I mean, it's like the new screen door effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because at this point the screen door effect has been effectively eliminated.
Yeah.
I very occasionally can notice it on my Quest 3, but honestly, not really.
Yeah, you have to look for it.
You have to look for it.
Whereas for me, the refresh thing kind of jumped out.
I actually have been, especially using my Quest 3 recently, I have been sort of amazed at how good it looks.
Well, and they keep improving it too.
Well, especially because the resolution bump from the Quest 2 to Quest 3 wasn't really that much.
Yeah, but the lenses were.
But the lenses absolutely were. Yeah. So next up, this was WWDC stuff, and there was a lot there. I think this part is really interesting because they're launching. This is effectively what they should have launched with, but they're releasing a lot more Apple TV Plus immersive video content. So they have a few things. There are currently only 7 total Apple immersive videos, and not including the trailer for all of them.
Right.
The fact that they launched with only 7, and they're only between like 5 to 20 minutes long, is sort of absurd as far as I'm concerned. But they only have so many production partners because and this is something that we've talked about, there are only so many studios that know how to make this content that exist at all, especially with budgets.
Yeah.
So there is almost guaranteed a production backlog because they can only produce so many of these things at the same time. I'm guessing the majority of that is in XVR, and I'm guessing 5 teams within the one overarching XVR team, but then maybe they're outsourcing a few other of these projects. Mind you, this is all speculation. So the upcoming Apple immersive video content is another episode of Adventure called Ice Driving. Wildlife got new episodes for elephants and sharks, which that wildlife one was in the trailer that we watched during our demo, was by far the most impressive stuff. Boundless, which is hot air balloons and Arctic surfing. Elevated, Maine and Hawaii, and then a Red Bull Extreme Sports series, which I think is going to be really cool. I've actually been thinking about doing some similar stuff, maybe because I think like skate videos in VR would be really cool, especially going down to Burnside Skate Park. That is a very dynamic location. A short video from The Weeknd, a new concert series, and then Combat Ready. Doesn't really say what this is. And then this is really the most interesting one for this new project. It's called Submerged, and it's the first scripted, I'm guessing fictional, Apple immersive video short by an Oscar-winning director, Edward Berger, who directed All Quiet on the Western Front. That is the big one, because all of the stuff that's come out from these platforms thus far has been
documentary effectively.
I mean, the dinosaur stuff is obviously not real, but it's based on science fact. Still documentary. But this one is actually scripted and fictional, which is hugely relevant for us because we're heavily interested in that filmmaking style, but has been largely avoided by the larger community other than a few projects by like Atlas V and The Faceless Lady, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I really want to watch this when it comes out. I'm going to have to try and get my hands on an Apple Vision Pro to figure it out. What do you think about these projects?
I mean, it's obviously great. The more content, the better.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes me wonder, was this always part of the strategy? Just put out a few things just to have enough for people to play with when they first get it? Or was like the response to the content a lot stronger than they had expected, and now they're scrambling to make more of it because there's a huge demand?
I'm guessing these projects take a long time to produce, especially this, because there's almost certainly a lot of VFX in all of these projects, and that stuff takes a while. So I'm guessing that this was always the plan.
Yeah.
To sort of stagger it, because they know how good quality these videos are. I mean, we watched them and they were really good.
But it's like we obviously are fans of the format, so to see that most of the people, like I don't know how many comments I've seen on like Facebook and stuff like that, where people are like, where can I see more? I need more content.
Yeah, I consistently see this narrative. Mind you, it's also probably self-selection bias, but I do feel like there is a very strong demand for more high quality immersive videos.
Yeah.
And there just aren't enough people that have a budget to be able to create this stuff, because there isn't a good place to distribute it unless you have a celebrity attached.
Right.
Which is frustrating as filmmakers, but we're trying to cross that Rubicon. So
yeah. It's encouraging though, because the more that these big companies are spending on content, the better for everybody.
Yeah. And it's definitely not as dire as it used to be. I think right now all the major players are probably ramping up producing more content, because especially when Google launches, I wrote a post on LinkedIn yesterday calling out Meta and effectively saying that they should create a VR video accelerator program.
Yeah.
I think if they work directly with creators to create a platform for onboarding that talks about best practices, that talks about shooting styles, the hardware, production pipeline, they could really benefit from creating a platform, because creating this stuff is very, very, very different from creating traditional video.
Yeah.
And most flat filmmakers, when they first get into this space, are totally bewildered. And, for good reason, because there are a lot of pitfalls and there's a lot of things that you're not going to be able to do in the same way.
Yeah, things don't transfer, especially if you're on a gimbal.
Yeah.
Please don't do that.
Yeah. And there's so many, and so this space can benefit from these things, especially because it'll show people what you can do, how to do it for the most part. You can figure it out, you can reverse engineer it. And with that, I mean, we're going to go into what effectively is our major discussion for the video, which is also at WWDC, they announced this huge sort of
kind of
bomb drop.
Bombshell, yeah.
Yeah.
Even though it was like, I think all of maybe 30 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, well, they left the actual details up to Blackmagic.
Yeah, which is totally fine. But yeah, as everybody already knows by now, they announced the Blackmagic Ursa Immersive camera, which will come soon, along with a couple of lenses from Canon, but we'll get to that.
Well, and alongside that, they also dropped the bomb that they'll be working directly with Blackmagic to create creator tools for use in DaVinci Resolve.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely huge.
Yeah, that's a big part of what I've got here is the they've created a new end-to-end workflow that's, you know, probably the biggest news to me. I mean, the camera is awesome, but the fact that, like, for us especially, because I already use DaVinci as post for these videos, and using Andrew's tools, CartaVR, to do our mapping and whatnot. So to have that built in, and I'm also a Blackmagic user, so I'm already a big fan of Blackmagic RAW. So the fact that, like, these lenses are calibrated and the metadata per lens is in the camera from the factory and is carried through all the way through to the file.
Yeah. So you were telling me earlier that with the camera system, with DaVinci and with Apple Immersive Video, you no longer going to need to recreate the lens profile.
Yes. So, like,
in Resolve.
That's the goal. So one of the big things that we do in Carta, and what you would also do in Mystica if you're a Mystica user, is aligning your disparities, right? So here's the quote from the actual thing, because there's a lot of information. The custom lens system is designed specifically for the Ursa Cine's large format image sensor, which is the thing I'm going to get to here in a minute, with extremely accurate positional data that's read and stored at the time of manufacturing. This immersive lens data, which is mapped, calibrated, and stored per eye, then travels through post-production in the Blackmagic RAW file itself.
Wow.
So that tells me that all the little things that we got to do right now with the R5C and the dual fisheye lens, with mapping it, calibrating it, all that stuff, and making sure I have that map file ready for any time we're doing it. And sometimes you have to change the map file. Will just be moot. We just won't have to do that.
Because this is a big deal, because tiny little problems like this are the majority of the time that's taken up in the production pipeline.
If you're
it bogs down the workflow so dramatically that this is, I mean, I don't know why something like this doesn't already exist.
Well, the demand had to be there, and or somebody with deep pockets like Apple had to step in and
convince them
and make it happen. Well, and or partner with them. I mean, share the cost of it, because this is not going to be a cheap camera to build and develop.
Oh no, not even
you know,
close.
And the fact that they're going all in. Like, I don't see any corners cut.
Professional camera. This is not a prosumer device.
Yeah.
This is significantly more expensive than the R5C.
Yeah.
In every way, not just the camera, but the actual production capability. You're going to need a very, very mature production studio to pull off working with this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, all the way through, even just when it comes to camera support, because the camera is much larger than a DSLR mirrorless camera, which is already quite a bit more to deal with than, say, you know, a small
the Insta360 Evo.
Yeah, the Evo or something like that.
Which I can fit in my pocket.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, it's you're getting a lot for it, but it is going to put it in an area that, like, most people won't be able to mess with.
Yeah.
But I'm here for it because of the quality that is possible here. Because we're looking at, like, the fact that it's large. So I'm curious about this specific thing where they say the large format image sensor. So one of the things, like with the R5C, obviously this works well, but we're doing both images on a single 8K sensor and splitting them and stretching them and all that other good stuff. So if we have a single lens per each full like large format sensor, means not only obviously we're going to have killer resolution, which is 8K per eye, right at where's my 8160 by 7200 per eye at 90 frames per second.
That is
with 16 stops of DR. So not only are you have the resolution that you need, but spread over a larger lens equals, like, a larger sensor equals you're using more of the lens, which means less optical clarity issues.
This is also that image quality and pixel per degree. You're now getting close to the optimal resolution for near photorealistic
like
VR.
1-to-1, yeah.
Like what was described by that researcher at Valve, you know, almost 15 years ago, or 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And so we've never had anything even approaching this type of quality in this field before.
Could only dream.
I mean,
about
it's
it.
the type of thing that, I mean, I'm guessing that Apple is using something similar, but they don't even have this yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. It is still in development, and the one thing that's really interesting to me is the fact that it is a custom lens, like a new thing that they've built. So I'm curious where the optics came from. Like, none of this is known yet. We just know that it's a custom-built stereoscopic fixed lens.
Yeah,
we don't know the
there
speed.
There was a little bit of talk that it was eye sugar lenses, but
Could be.
we're not sure. That's also speculation.
None of that's known. We don't know the speed yet. We don't even, frankly, know the field of view. We just know that it's designed for Apple's 180, so it should be at least 180 degrees. But we still don't know that. So there's a few things that we don't know, but what we do know is very, very encouraging. So this seems to be built on the new 12K Ursa that hasn't been released yet,
but it's coming out soon.
But it's coming out very soon.
And a lot of they've already announced a lot of the feature set on that one.
Yes, that one's like, whereas with the Ursa Immersive, it's just a press release, and we're trying to glean as much as we can. Where we actually have a spec sheet for the 12K, so it looks to be based on the 12K body at the very least. All that's very familiar. Uses the same media module, which I think this is very interesting. So the camera comes with an 8 terabyte SSD memory module. Looks to be maybe a couple of M2 drives and a RAID 0, not sure, but just based on...
because there's no existing cards.
There's no cards for it. You just use the memory module.
That can record at this...
Probably not. Yeah. We don't know for sure.
We don't know.
Because the other thing with Blackmagic RAW is you have different quality settings, like compression ratios. So there's a way you could possibly do it, but we don't know. There's a lot that we don't know. It's just interesting because both the 12K regular Ursa also works this way. Which is one less sensor and probably 2/3 the resolution. So based on that, we can glean. So the 12K is a $15,000 camera with no other accessories, but that is ready to shoot. There's no eyepiece or battery, but that does come with the memory module, which is a $1,700.
But it's only got one sensor.
It's only got the one sensor.
Yeah.
And no lens, right? So depending on the cost of development of the lens. And
I mean, for context, this VR lens was what, $2,000?
Yeah.
So, and this is,
so if it is large format sensors, that means the lenses are going to be bigger. The elements will be bigger because it's covering double the lens, double the sensor basically that this APS that the.
So most likely that the lens is going to be much integrated into the price. It's going to be much more a part of the price structure.
Yes, for sure. Which is, again, new for Blackmagic. They're not exactly a lens company. But the one thing about Blackmagic is they probably have the fairest pricing in the market. Like, most things cost way more than this for way less camera.
Because they're about disruption.
They seem to be about disruption. I mean, the camera comes with a license for DaVinci Resolve. Every camera they sell comes with a license for DaVinci Resolve. And that's not even just like the one that's out right now. That's a perpetual license forever. Like, they're kind of great about this sort of thing. So I am so happy that of all the companies they chose to partner with, it was Blackmagic. Because I think this camera's going to come in under 30. I'm going to shoot somewhere around 25, maybe, just based on the 12K being 15. But it could be less. It just
said because part of that is that you don't have to buy the memory module. It's included.
Right.
It's ready to shoot.
Right. So that's like... Now it is in other ways a hungrier camera. It comes with a B mount battery, and a 250 watt power supply.
Oh my
so this
God.
is a thirsty boy.
You need a generator for that damn thing.
And that B plus, so that's a 24 volt battery system. So yeah, your typical 12 volt,
not going to work.
Gold mount batteries aren't going to work. Presumably, anyway. I mean, maybe they'll come up with a shark fin for it or something. But other than that, it's ready to go out of the gate. And 8 terabytes is supposed to get you just over 2 hours of footage.
So that's where we were describing the type of production house you're going to have access to work with this data is significant.
Yeah.
Significant. I mean, it's currently out of our capability.
Yeah.
Not even quite a bit out of our capability, but we're getting there.
But very, very exciting. And then, yeah, the workflow stuff, that's, built-in proxies and stuff like that, being able to, if you have the infrastructure in place for this, you can be uploading either your raw files or your proxy files while you're shooting, so the editors can start working on your stuff through the whole cloud system that they've announced previously. So they're really going for a professional workflow here. And again, not cutting any corners. You got 12G SDI, you got 10 gig Ethernet.
And a lot of these features, I'm sure, were developed in tandem with professionals being like, we can't use these unreliable systems anymore. You can't go to clients and say
hodgepodge.
You can't go to clients and say, I'm sorry, the ST mapper keeps crashing.
Right. Yeah. Our custom software that some dude wrote,
for free,
isn't working anymore,
Yeah.
or whatever, or an update killed it or whatever. Like that stuff doesn't work, and we've all been struggling with that this whole time, with the hodgepodge of support. So this is like taking an existing or basically existing camera system and just extending it, which is again awesome. So one other thing about this I wanted to mention. Yeah, I mean, even the fact that it has two screens. So again, this is like a proper cinema camera. So it's got a fold-out screen for the operator. Still got a screen on the other side for the assist. So like the fact that they left that in, they're emphasizing that this is designed for professional workflows, and like I'm here for it. It's very cool.
You even said that you were able to figure out that it still does have the ND filters.
It looks like it does. So again, not
speculation
been announced,
again.
But if you look at the body again, because like basically from the lens back, it's the 12K. So there's a couple of buttons on the top of the body there, plus and minus, that are for your ND filters on the 12K. So and those buttons are still there in the pictures anyway. So I'm crossing fingers, and it would make a lot of sense that you've got a fixed lens system. The only way you can have NDs on that is in the body.
Built in, yeah.
So it looks like they really thought of everything on that.
This makes me very happy that this exists, because it legitimizes a lot of things about this medium in ways that we hadn't really. It's sort of like it's probably even bigger in scope than the announcement of the Canon R5C dual fisheye mount.
Yeah, I mean, well, that was, yeah. How do you compare this? Okay, so like that lens is kind of as disruptive as the 5D Mark II was when it came out.
Traditional,
like, because that just shattered everything. I mean, it birthed DSLR filmmaking.
Yeah,
there was nothing before. I mean, I tell this story a lot because I think it's hilarious. I was doing 35 millimeter depth of field adapters. I just put together a whole kit with a expensive 35 millimeter adapter, and then that camera was announced and just made it completely irrelevant overnight.
It was like a neutron bomb going off.
Yeah. So that's what this lens has done for the past couple of years. So now it's like, okay, well, I don't know what you would call this equivalent.
This is sort of like maybe the arrival of the Red.
Yeah. Actually, it's actually probably more the promise, because Red was always supposed to be obsolete. It was supposed to be affordable, and at the time, I guess it was. By comparison, you're talking about 20 grand instead of 100 grand for a camera. But this is probably going to be the real disruption in that,
for professional.
For that, yeah.
Pipelines. Another thing that was sort of nestled in there during the WWDC announcement, sort of head scratching, but in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense given the market situation, was that Apple's going to be partnering with Vimeo.
Yeah.
A platform that I have not heard about in years.
Mentioned.
Yeah. Which was trying really, really hard to be the anti-YouTube for a long time. And I kid, I still see a lot of professional portfolios on Vimeo because it's more of a streamlined professional platform.
Yeah.
And actually, Vimeo has had support for 360 videos for a while. I'm unsure if they ever created VR 180 support.
I don't believe they have.
I don't believe that they have. But this sort of negates that because they're going to be working directly with Apple and it's going to support NVHEVC. It's going to support Apple immersive video format. It's sort of and this is all happening because YouTube and Apple are not friends. They've been spurned. Google and Apple have a very, very, very complicated history, and currently it seems that other than the $4 billion or so that they pay Google to be the front page of Safari, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with the fact that YouTube, Google, and Samsung are working on their own competing headset.
Yeah, and they've just been sleeping on VR. I mean, the fact that they had to bring features back because they were deprecating stuff, so now we're back to 8K and all this stuff. You know, nobody wants to bet on somebody who's going to be like changing their mind all the time. Be like, well, okay, it's out. No, it's in. It's out. We're in. Okay, now we're out. Now we're back in.
Yeah, and Google had their own VR headset.
They were ahead 10 years ago.
And the actual implementation, the software implementation of YouTube on the Daydream platform was miles ahead of Facebook's software implementation. It was much, much more robust feature set. The software was more stable, but because it didn't sell, it wasn't an instant hit, they deprecated it after almost a year.
Yeah.
And so if I was any other creators or company trying to get into that space, I would run away from them at the earliest chance.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a little confusing why Vimeo, because I don't know, I haven't seen Vimeo relevant in a long time, but they do have the infrastructure for it, for sure.
Yeah.
They have the streaming tech, they have the cloud rendering tech, so
yeah, it's not already riddled with ads. It is a different platform, and it is kind of just like, why not Vimeo, right? I think it's the only other viable alternative, and
rather than, I mean, I've always sort of wondered why Apple didn't decide to just do it themselves and create their own user-generated content platform.
It's just not their bag. It's kind of interesting. I kind of agree, but I also understand why they didn't. I mean, they just make certain bets, and that's never really been their thing.
Yeah.
Because
I sort of get why they haven't done it, but it would solve a lot of problems for them.
I don't know if it would, because I mean, then they become a big part of Apple's thing is that they're about privacy, and you're paying for an experience on the device, right? Which means no ads.
Yeah.
It just means no ads. And YouTube has always been and intended to be an ad delivery platform.
They're an ad company.
That's what
just
they
like
do.
Facebook.
It's what they do. And so it's sort of anti the ethos of Apple in that way, where it's like you spend more on the device, but it's not subsidized by ads. It doesn't have apps on it that you cannot remove because Facebook paid to have that thing permanently on the phone or whatever. That's been the whole thing. So I think just steering clear of that. And also, they've always been about high quality, and user-generated content up until recently
has not been
high quality.
Yeah.
Hence why they're really protective already about the immersive content.
Yeah.
And who's creating
it.
it.
And the interesting thing is Meta has their own user-generated content platform. They don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
But
there's no curation.
Well, there is a little bit
curation.
of curation, actually. In fact, I think there might be a little too much curation.
Yeah, maybe. But there's I don't know.
But what they're not doing is that they're not creating enough of a onboarding platform for there to really be something that takes off. A lot of the stuff that it seems like they're creating is very low production cost and dubiously creative.
Yeah, we'll just say they're going for quantity over quality.
Yeah.
And clearly Apple's going the other way because there's 7 things. So
there's got to be...
There's a middle ground.
And I think when Samsung and Google launch their headset, I'm guessing that YouTube will probably have a better system in place, because historically they've created their own content. They've sponsored YouTube series. They even have their own YouTube TV platform, which has originals on it. Though I have heard that they've dialed back a lot of that content. But if they're going to be launching an immersive platform, they're going to need immersive videos to launch on it. And I'm guessing that they're probably batching that stuff up in the background. Again, this is speculation. I think the camera and the Blackmagic Design partnership, I think, is incredibly tactical. I think it's a very smart move. I don't know what the user-generated content on Vimeo is going to look like. That's going to be...
Yeah, which actually kind of leads to the next, or the last point anyway, that I have. The other two things that were announced were these two Canon lenses. So one of them looks just to be a scaled-down version of the 5.2 mil, the 3.9 mil APS-C, lens designed for APS-C size cameras. This is interesting because presumably it's going to be cheaper. We actually don't know. I don't think.
Yeah.
It's not actually out, but so design seems to be for the R7. And the other thing that's interesting is they keep saying that it's going to be 4K 30 frames, but the R7 can do 60 frames. And so there's like questions like, is it going to be some weird thing where they lock it down via the firmware integration that'll only do 30 for some reason? But that'll be in it. Maybe that's just a typo. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the main thing is that this thing it's for small format cameras, which means only so much resolution is possible. So while it is
it's up to 4K, right?
Yeah, it's 4K.
Yeah. Which
at least on the R7. Like if somebody can come out with an 8K APS-C size sensor, then maybe we'd be talking.
Well, and I watched Hugh's review of it, and there was some stuff that I didn't see in the review, but it seems like he says it's sharper in the center, but the resolution is lower, but it also has a lower field of view, so the PPD is about the same.
Right. So it's an interesting thing. I'm glad they're doing it. I think the things that are most interesting about this lens are actually the features it has, which means there's more than likely going to be a version 2 of the 5.2 mil that incorporates these things, which is it's got autofocus. It's momentary autofocus, but still that's awesome. Like it's not continuous, but it's just a nice thing to not sit there and look, and you can just click and give a half press, and you got focus lock, and that the inter lens focal adjustment is also electric and not this fiddly tool situation. So that's cool. The other biggest thing for me is the spin-on filters on the back.
Yeah.
Because we had to spend a pretty good amount of money and get really scary setting in a magnetic frame on the inside of the R5C so that we could have NDs on the R5C. So that's a great thing. I mean, granted, technically the 5.2 has a way to put ND back there, but it's got to be a gelatin filter that you screw down with. That's not real.
Oof, yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Well, and then the last lens, Canon has sort of been hinting at this. We've showed pictures of it in previous episodes.
Yeah, it looks a little different, but
that's the spatial video
this
lens.
This is the 7.8 millimeter.
Yeah.
It's even slower, which is interesting. I think this one's an f4 lens. STM, I want to say, but there's very little about this one, but there is some interesting stuff about it. So the thing that I thought was really interesting is it's still using, so we've all been speculating that the iPhone 15, they sort of, kludge the spatial shooting with how close the lenses are together. And this lens has what looks to be the same or very, very similar IPD.
Distance, yeah.
Lenses just like this next to each other. So that's really interesting. But from the press release, they use this language, which I think is really interesting. Features a field angle that is similar to a person's field of view, which enables videographers to naturally capture memorable moments. That's an interesting.
What does that
word
mean?
Soup there.
Yeah. They're very clearly obfuscating some information.
Something there because it's field angle sounds like field of view to some degree, but it is like. But does that mean that Apple is really sticking with that IPD? for spatial because
Probably,
my
yeah.
understanding is on the AVP they are
It's more
eye
natural,
distance
yeah.
apart. So that's interesting. But either way, this it
I
just
mean,
shows
it'll naturally create a hypostereo effect, right?
right.
Yeah.
Somewhat hypo, yeah. But so there's been all this speculation that Apple's doing like post processing with the lidar and this and that to make it look more comfortable. But this kind of indicates that that's not true at all. But we'll see what comes out of this. But I think it's interesting, and this goes along with the Vimeo thing that like this is apparently there's going to be a market. I don't know that I see it yet for square 3D videos, like not immersive, but just 3D content. Because that's what this generates.
Yeah, I don't know. I disagree. I think there will be a market for it, and we've even played...
I didn't say there wasn't.
Oh.
I'm saying that's what they're saying it is. I don't know about it.
Okay.
Like, I don't know that it's marketable to me.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
But no, clearly they're throwing money at it.
Yeah.
And there seems to be excitement over it. I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting. We obviously use spatial videos as like B-cam type inserts on our immersive videos.
And they work
and it works really, really
very well. Yeah.
Yeah, don't get me wrong.
I've been quite pleased with them.
But I just wonder if it's another, because it's like a half measure, right? Like without the immersion, is it that interesting?
I think it is.
I think it's interesting, and for memories and the way that Apple has pitched it.
I also think it's really interesting for looking at objects with a sense of, because I think, and we've talked about this in sort of in more filmmaking specific terms, is what is the value of shooting in VR 180 when sometimes you don't want to see the things around you? Why wouldn't you just shoot it flat? And I think a lot of that has to do with a sense of depth. I think here's the thing is that even just stereoscopic effect alone, I think creates a sense of presence that is not replicated by flat filming.
Yeah, no, there's no question. To counter the idea that like, because it's not just seeing around you, it's the fact that you move your head in the video is like you're still looking around the video a little bit, which, you know, when you're looking at a frame, that kind of is broken. I will say what is interesting about this is it does allow you to film in a more traditional manner, i.e. moving around a gimbal a lot.
Yeah.
Like you're not making people sick with spatial videos. So maybe it's a gateway and or, you know, one of those things.
It's a lot harder.
There's like one of those things, unless you're blowing it up, right? Because you're not messing with...
I mean, I definitely have I've felt...
eye strain maybe, but not...
Well, no, I have watched some 3D movies on a really large screen and felt nauseous before.
But that's a 3D movie, so that's different, right? Because several 3D movies were not captured in 3D. They were interpolated, and you can see that in those, like, there's slices to it, and you can very clearly see.
Like my buddies at Legend 3D used to do.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
And I know those are the ones that are like they're hard to watch. Really, you know, have to really tweak them to get them like comfortable to look at. But the ones that were shot natively usually work pretty well. As far as for me, actual spatial video shot on the iPhone, they work, and I've not ever been like sick. But again, you might have eye strain, but only if you blow it up big enough to. It's one of those funny things with the brain. It's like you have to anchor something. But yeah, being able, and I will say another pro towards spatial shooting is you can get closer to objects, right?
Much closer.
Much closer. And because of that hypo stereo effect, there is some cool, like, it's almost like a macro lens for immersive
We're working
content.
on a project that
we'll be
the reason
doing
we know about this is so much is we're working on a project that utilizes the hypo stereo effect to great results.
Yeah, which is a pain on the iPhone because of the two different sensors and and apertures and everything.
That's why I've been sort of keeping my eye on other spatial video cameras, something that has got more consistency between the two sensors.
Yeah, so in that way, I would be interested in this spatial lens if it's affordable.
Yeah.
Because we could use that for inserts instead of an iPhone. Or at least maybe the next iPhone won't be doing this sort of kludge thing with two different cameras, because it stinks.
Well, and I think that probably we have just a little bit more, just a tiny bit of stuff to talk about. that is relevant to this is that, so people have been asking us what our next thing is for a while. You know, Adam sort of drove it into us on one of the podcast episodes. And we're working on something right now, and it's a big swing for us. It's a big project. It's very ambitious. It's not crazy. It's doable.
No, it's doable, but like with anything,
it is going to require a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of money. Not a crazy amount of money.
Yeah.
But definitely a budget. And we're putting that together right now. We applied for a grant from Oregon Film Fund. That itself is a swing. We might not get it. We might get it. Who knows? But we're planning
around it.
We're planning around it just in case it doesn't go that way. But effectively, we're going to be working on a crowdfunding campaign. It's going to launch later this year. We're still very much in the pre-production phase. We want to make it high quality. We want to make it good, and so we want to really make sure that everything is taken care of. And we're going to need help from our more out there resources. I think it's this type of project, and especially for small filmmakers, we hope that it's in everyone's best interest, because this is a scripted, fictional project, and we want it to be really good, and we want it to be our calling card. And what do you think, Anthony?
What he said. I mean,
yeah.
It is all those things. There's a lot of effort and writing.
We've worked on a lot of projects of similar size. This one is a little bit bigger, and it's ours this time. It's not, we're not showing up on set for a different producer. So it's a lot more ambitious, but it's something that we need to do, and we hope that you will help us do it. And we'll have more details in the future. We want to be sort of vague right now because we're still putting it together, but it's a big thing for us, and it may, when we get closer to the timeline of it, it may interrupt the production of the podcast, because it's going to take precedence for sure. But we'll also be using the podcast as a platform to sort of bring people in, because we think it's important for our viewers to understand that this is a podcast about filmmaking, and not just talking about other people doing filmmaking.
Yeah.
Part of the reason we created this was we knew eventually we would get to this point, and we wanted to be able to share our capabilities and our ambitions and pitfalls.
Yeah.
With the viewers, because I think that's really, there are other podcasts that talk about, movies and behind the scenes and production and screenwriting and that type of thing. And that's sort of more of the vein that we've always wanted to be in. We talk about the technical stuff because it's relevant to the industry. But we want to be sort of more holistic about the production of immersive video filmmaking.
Yep.
Yeah. So I really hope that you can help us out when the time comes, because we're going to need it.
Yeah. It's something we believe in. We think a good number of y'all believe in it.
Exactly.
So, if we want more content, we got to pull together and try to make it happen.
Yeah. And with that, we're bringing the Stereoscope podcast number 6 to a close. Thank you so much.